get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Oh, get on board the Bernier bus train.
Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernier Bus Show. We're going to lead off today with media bias against Bernie Sanders. If you go to this Wikipedia article, you can find this, at least for now. I was nervous that it would disappear. Very complete article, very well-supported article. But it says, this article is being considered for deletion in accordance with Wikipedia's deletion policy. Please share your thoughts on the matter at this article's entry on the articles for deletion. And I found this last night. I'm not even sure if this article is still here. I didn't want it to disappear, so it's in my cache. But I think we should figure out what's in here. And I'm curious if anyone can figure out, if any of the sleuths who watch the Bernier Bus Show can figure out why the article is being considered for deletion and who is leading this charge. I imagine there are lots of people that want to claw and scratch this article out of existence. David Brock, John Cowan, Neera Tanden, Hillary Clinton, and the Hollywood agencies that support Hillary Clinton. Barack Obama, I'm sure, doesn't want this article out there. There are some powerful people, if they know about this article, will obviously not want it. So it is interesting to me. I'm curious as to how long it will last. The neutrality of this article is disputed. That's interesting. Let's unpack a few of the points here, but mostly I want you to make you aware of its existence. Various media outlets have raised concerns that the mainstream media in the United States have made a concerted effort to downplay, underreport, or ignore the popularity of Bernie Sanders, primarily concerning both his 2016 and 2020 presidential campaigns. For those of you who say, if he gets cheated again, I'm Bernie or bust, well, he's already getting cheated again, and this article is all the smoking gun proof that you need. So if this article disappears, it's because it's providing or will provide too much ammo for the people who say, okay, I'm willing to play the game the way you want me to until it's clear that there's cheating. And then all bets are off. Then it's Bernie or bust time. And to me, that's the most logical reason to want this article to disappear. Accusations have ranged from explicit media bias, journalistic malpractice, and distortions of information and data. Alternative media, such as Rising with Hill's Crystal Ball and Sagar Enjeti, Jacobin, Vox, Common Dreams, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, and prominent YouTube political commentators. That's right, Jimmy Dore, Tim Black. We've got some prominent political commentators. They're not just hiding in the shadows. I feature them in this show all the time. I'm so glad to see the word prominent and hooked up with the people that I follow on this show. These prominent political commentators, among others, have published articles, videos, and reports discussing what they see as an alleged media bias against Bernie Sanders. Online communities on websites such as Twitter and Reddit have played a role in documenting what they see as bias in reporting as well. The campaign runs its own media platforms, such as the online newsletter Burn Notice, Hear the Burn podcast, a channel on Twitch, as well as Twitter and Facebook, many of which discuss media bias and what they call the Bernie blackout. And all of these have been featured on the Bernie or Bust television show. Accusations of bias often revolve around themes concerning the concentration of media ownership, profit-driven special interests, manufacturing consent, and the propaganda model. If you look at Noam Chomsky, there's a great example of the propaganda model. General media propaganda, conflicts of interest, and agenda-setting theory. The most prominent media organizations being accused of bias have been MSNBC, The Washington Post, and The New York Times. Many of the media organizations have responded to the criticisms in various ways through rebuttals, criticism, and analysis. Various studies have been done in an effort to document statistical data in regard to news coverage of presidential candidates. First discussed during the 2016 Democratic Party presidential primaries, responses to the outcome gave rise to accusations of conspiracies. That's what they always want to do. That's why the first few episodes of the Bernie or Bust show featured me wearing my aluminum tinfoil hat. Yeah, that's a powerful way to keep the dissident voices quiet. Just call them conspiracy theorists. About rigging of the primary election, most notably from the DNC leaked emails leading to investigations, public apologies, and resignations of DNC officials. Yeah, we made that all up. Further discussions have arisen since Sanders' announcement for his 2020 campaign, echoing similar themes from 2016. Legitimacy of the bias has been called into question by some political commentators. So far, this article is laid out like a real news story, not like an op-ed, not like an opinion piece. This is laid out like a solid piece of journalism. If you're old enough to remember what solid journalism looks like, because I haven't seen much of it lately. So then we start with the 2016 primary campaign. Vermont Public Radio reported that Sanders would announce his candidacy. In an interview with USA Today on April 29th, Sanders stated that he was running in this election to win and launched a campaign website effectively beginning his run. Sanders said he was motivated to enter the race by what he termed obscene levels of income disparity and the campaign finance system. On May 26, 2015, Sanders officially announced his candidacy at Burlington's Waterfront Park. In an interview with National Review's Jamie Weinstein, MSNBC host Ed Schultz, rest in peace Ed Schultz, stated that he had prepared a report on Bernie Sanders' presidential candidate announcement at his home, but 5 minutes before the broadcast was due to air, he was told by then president of MSNBC, Phil Griffin, that you're not covering this, and you're not covering Bernie Sanders. 45 days later, Schultz was terminated by MSNBC. And I've covered that on the Bernie or Bust show. I love this article because it's a compendium of many of the topics I've already covered. So if you're curious, as you read through this article, I've put together various supporting clips and articles on many of these topics. Sad to say they have not quoted the Bernie or Bust show in the credits at the bottom, but they might have. Early campaign months. In an analysis by Jim Narekis from FAIR, using the Nexus database, calculated the number of mentions of Sanders versus Donald Trump. And I've been over that in my show. In October 2015, Story Hinckley of the Christian Science Monitor published an article discussing what he called a near blackout from major TV news sources. He indicated that at the time, Sanders was polling high and bringing in significant donations, yet the mainstream media were giving insufficient coverage of the campaign. Chris Wygant from HuffPost opined in September that Sanders was receiving little media coverage as well. Media Matters for America reported that media networks were overwhelmingly covering Hillary Clinton's email controversy while ignoring Sanders. In a study of campaign coverage conducted by Andrew Tyndall, ABC, CBS, and NBC devoted 504 minutes to the presidential race. 338 minutes were devoted to the Republican race, 128 minutes to the Democratic race, and a total of 8 minutes devoted to Bernie Sanders, compared to 145 minutes for Trump, 82 minutes for Clinton, 83 minutes for Clinton's email controversy, and 43 minutes to Jeb Bush. Then we go through. So a lot of people are in denial. Vote blue no matter who. Democrats are in denial that the 2016 campaign was even rigged. And so you show them and they cover their ears and their eyes and will not listen about 2016. So the first thing this article does is make sure that 2016 is documented. And then we go to the 2020 primary campaign. And we have February, we have July. I've covered Mimi Roca proclaiming that Bernie Sanders made her skin crawl. That was one of the best ones. Katie Halper striking back. We've got all this. This is when I think somewhere in here is when I started the Bernie or Bust show. And so I'm noticing that the topics covered in this article match pretty closely the topics I've covered on my show. So you can go through here. David Sirota, New Hampshire polling reports. Sanders' speechwriter, David Sirota, wrote in the campaign's Burn Notice newsletter, in the last week, a wave of polls has emerged showing a genuine full-on Bernie surge, but you might not know that if you tuned into cable TV or read the headlines from the National Press Corps. In fact, you might not even know Bernie is running for president. As Bernie gains big momentum heading into the final 100 days until the Iowa caucuses, we see that the divide between the actual polls and the media's manufactured narrative is getting wider. In fact, the situation has gotten so obvious and laughable that The Onion decided to call it out and lampoon it. Sirota went on to list 3 different examples of misreporting of poll numbers by CNN and the New York Times, as well as outlining several news articles' headlines that left Sanders' name out despite his lead in the polls. Ryan Grimm from The Intercept noted similar headlines on his Twitter feed on October 29th. One headline read, "Buttigieg in 4th, but a strong 4th," which was subsequently commented on and mocked by journalist Crystal Ball from The Hill. Common Dreams detailed the controversy after it unfolded. The headline at the satirical newspaper The Onion that Sirota referenced was entitled, "MSNBC poll finds support for Bernie Sanders has plummeted 2 points up," poking fun at the alleged media bias. This was not the first time The Onion wrote a satirical piece about the Sanders campaign, as in October, Sanders jokingly shared the satirical article, "Bernie Sanders holds secret campaign meeting with 15,000 working-class Democratic donors," on his Twitter feed. In these times, criticism. Okay, so here we are, the balanced part. And which outlets have offered criticism of these accusations? Politico, Vox, and WAPO. This is a surprise. And then we talk about, or this article talks about fact-checking. The Post gave Sanders 3 Pinocchios, meaning mostly false, for his claim on medical debt. And then I've read lots of articles that show that there were no Pinocchios at all, that Bernie Sanders spoke truth and backed it up. And then Emma Spector at Vogue, Domenico Montanaro of NPR. NPR, I used to like NPR. It's really sad how much a mouthpiece of the oligarchy NPR is. Some of the comfortable Democrats who support Buttigieg or Warren listen to NPR every day. The wine track candidates that Crystal Ball mentions. And we've got a preliminary study by Northeastern University School of Journalism, and they found that Sanders was receiving the most positive coverage of any major candidate, while an expanded, updated analysis in April placed him 3rd out of 8 candidates. A further update found that Sanders' positive coverage ranked 4th out of 8 major candidates. The interview with Ed Schultz, I have that. If you go back to the Right Bernie or Bust episode, I have that interview with Ed Schultz. It's been redacted on the National Review website, episode 55, Ed Schultz. And then we've got, I guess they have it here, archived at Wayback Machine. You should watch that if you watch nothing else from these references. And then we have a well-referenced, well-researched reading list here of sources. Wow. It would be sad if this disappears. I'm not going to click out of this until I've copied the whole thing and archived it myself. It's listed under the fair use. CC down here. So the content is available. You're allowed to use it as long as it hasn't disappeared. If you get a chance, weigh in on this discussion they mentioned. I haven't yet, but it says you can share your thoughts on the matter at this article's entry on the articles for deletion, and you can click learn more and figure that out. I hope a number of us will do that. Now let's go back to Obama for a bit. There's a new article about Obama and his motivations here. What Obama Really Wants by David Dayen, November 22nd. It's a very recent article, and the whole thing is worthy of your perusal. I'm going to skip about halfway down and show you this quote. The truth is that Obama, who reiterated his comments to donors in San Francisco on Thursday, presided over a country where inequality continued to worsen, where dominant monopolies continued to consolidate, where regions continued to slip behind a handful of cities on the coasts, where all of the post-recession gains went to those at the top. Obama wasn't the only factor in this sclerotic improvement. He was handed a deep recession by his predecessor and a right-wing Congress 2 years into his tenure. But those electoral losses, among the largest for a two-term president since World War II, do reflect the inadequacies of market-driven incrementalism to deliver accountability for the sins of the financial crisis and tangible relief to the millions who suffered as a consequence. If it did, the wealthy donors Obama spends time with while criticizing the left would have less in their bank accounts. Even though Obama routinely expressed throughout his presidency that America has a long way to go to be perfected, even though he praised good new ideas like Medicare for All as recently as last September, he seems to see anyone else saying these things as attacking his legacy. One reason why Obama attempts to rally the base for moderates may be in his difficulty abiding a Democratic Party that even intimates that he failed to tangibly benefit the lives of the working class. It remains to be seen if the dogs will like the dog food this time around. Deval Patrick, an Obama friend and perhaps the candidate closest to Obama's model of social liberalism and corporate-friendly economics, got 2 people to show up to his latest campaign event. Woo! Michael Bloomberg has no constituency in national politics at all. Joe Biden is coasting on name recognition and constant invocation of Obama's name, while Pete Buttigieg has surged on his brand of McKinsey PowerPoints and TED Talks, which fits the Obama style. It's certainly possible that Obama's absence has made Democratic hearts grow fond for someone in his image, and that image will carry the day. I wanted to point this out. It goes on in a very powerful way. These last 2 paragraphs are awesome. But I just want to say that the reason I'm shifting over here to the Obama article is because these are the powers that don't want you to know about media bias. These are the powers who will not tolerate this story getting out if they can possibly help it. And so the media bias is the trigger. It's the spark, I believe, that will ignite the whole thing, that will ignite the revolution that Bernie or Busters are talking about. And so if you are afraid of the people, like the oligarchs were in the time of FDR, if you're afraid that they're going to come after you with their pitchforks, you don't want them to figure out that everything has been rigged for a long time. The Democratic Party has been rigging its process against insurgents, against populist insurgents, for at least 100 years. So if you're afraid of the masses of people, especially if you're afraid of labor unions that have true labor leaders who want things to get better and are not going to kowtow to the oligarchs, that you don't want this message to get out, because once people get riled up enough to walk out on the street and not turn cars over or burn things or loot, but to wave signs like Occupy movement, and if it gets more like the Yellow Vest movement, so be it. That's what will need to happen. But if you're afraid of that, if you're one of the plutocrats who's afraid of that, then you don't want the people to get stirred up. You don't want them to hear that they're being lied to. Now, we're going to pivot to Elizabeth Warren because she's another person. She's a wolf in sheep's clothing. And so if you're on board so far with what I'm saying about Obama and neoliberalism, and you're realizing that market-driven neoliberalism has been terrible, also if you're willing to admit that Bill Clinton and Barack Obama are just the same as Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, if you're willing to admit that they're all neoliberals and that they've all thrown working class people under the bus, then you might still be saying, well, Elizabeth Warren, she's not a socialist. I'm not a socialist either. And so I like Elizabeth Warren because she's the next best thing to Bernie. And she says things like this. And after this clip, we'll hear what Richard Wolff has to say about it.
Many activists, though, say that an economic system based on perpetual growth is fundamentally at odds with a stable, clean, and sustainable environment. How do you reconcile this?
Good question.
The way I see this, I believe in markets. I think markets bring us a lot of innovation, a lot of creation, a lot of change. That's good. I want to see, for example, markets for clean, not just clean energy, but how we're going to clean the carbon out of the air, how we're going
to have clean rockets to bomb people with, too.
Clean the filth out of the water. But understand this, markets without rules are theft. They're theft. It allows, whenever you get a chance, when you have a market that people get to, corporations get to cheat people, that's theft. That's not a market. And that's not how markets are supposed to operate. So my efforts for many years now have been about how we get those markets to function so that we get the best out of the markets, but that people don't get cheated. And maybe the best example of that is in the early 2000s. I'll just give you an example. Toasters. I'm sorry, I'm not going to start with my toaster story. I'll just start it with mortgages. Mortgages were so dangerous and so complex that someone who got a mortgage had a 1 in 5 chance of losing their home over that mortgage. Not through a fire, but through foreclosure. Communities of color were targeted for the worst of the worst mortgage. And the government, they weren't on the side of the people. They were deep in the pockets of the big banks. In fact...
So why won't you come out and call Barack Obama a crook? Why won't you come out and tell us that Barack Obama is why this happened? Or one of the reasons, a powerful reason that this happened, and that he bailed all these crooks out.
So deep that they let the big banks sell enough of those mortgages to crash the entire economy. So after that crash, I had an idea, and the idea was for a consumer agency.
Which is now in the hands of the Republicans and not helping very much. And I, not to be snarky, it's a great idea, but I think that actually goes back to the dynamic you articulated before about how deep reforms can actually go. But how do you grade that answer overall?
Well, for me, it's just a way of saying, hoping to say to those on the left who support Bernie, you can't get him because he's a socialist. So I'm the next best thing. You can go for me. And to the people who she hopes will realize that they can't put another centrist up, that the party, the mass of the people will not support it, that she's close enough that you can scoop up the progressives who will be grateful that they have her rather than a Biden or a Buttigieg or any of the other ones. So she's just positioning herself, and she said the substance of what she says is silly. I mean, what is this? Silly. The pure market. We've never had that. What is this? The socialists have a right to say, look, we think socialism is different from what these early experiments were. Russia, China. Because they were early experiments, they did things that we have to learn never to do again, and they did some things that we have to keep. And you can believe that because it's but capitalism's been around for 300 years. It's had a lot of experiments, like every country on Earth. And in every country on Earth, the markets work in the way they work and not in this idealized libertarian fantasy. They just want to hold on to capitalism. So they have to create a magical one, a one in which the rules are. What do you think wealth does when you put in rules? It either goes around them.
This is the part you need to pay attention to. What happens when you put in Elizabeth Warren's rules on capitalism, which has resisted them for 300 years?
Or it modifies them, or it gets rid of them. That's what it did every time. If you don't deal with the basic structure of capitalism, you're leaving in place the people who will undo the rules. Coming up with a new one, a consumer agent, oh, come on. I mean, that's why I said it before. We've been there. We've done that. If you don't take the wealth and power away from the core of the capitalists who have it, they will undo whatever you do.
Right.
That's what they've always done. Why would you expect them not to do that again? Why are you afraid? Look, it's like a military. If you defeat another army, but you let them keep the guns and tanks and planes and bombs, you're looking for trouble. You have to disarm them, which all military people do, unless there's something else going on, so that the anger and upset of having been defeated will not come back. Right? So
that's it. And that's what FDR didn't do. FDR left the robber barons in charge. He took away their wealth, some of it, to build up the world again. The whole world was in malaise at that time. It wasn't just the United States that was in an economic rut, in an economic horror. And so what we had is the rich people were being negotiated with, but they weren't disarmed. They left them with enough of the wealth that they came roaring back with a vengeance, and Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher are the personification of that vengeance, and markets have done what markets do ever since. And the innovative part is innovation for the sake of those at the very top, and everyone else is in a kind of slavery, indebted to everyone, deeply in debt. All the rest of us, I owe, so off to work I go. We're all owned by our owners. George Carlin had it right. And what Elizabeth Warren describes is a pipe dream. And we've had enough of capitalism to know absolutely that it won't work. And the point I like to make as a cynic, I know in my heart that she absolutely knows this. She knows that. Because if she had any hope of changing it, if there was any intention in her mind of actually changing anything, then the donors wouldn't support her. The donors wouldn't be fawning over her in the corporate media as they have been. And that's the clearest proof of all. Same with Hillary Clinton. She talks about incrementally changing things. Obama, too, being a centrist, is better. Getting some things done is better than getting nothing done. But if they really intended to get anything done, their donors would leave them. The people that pay them to give speeches would say, nope, you're not on our team anymore. Whose team are you on anyway? Those socialists? Those damn socialists? And that's where we're going here. So I think the words are really screwing us up. Capitalism, socialism, communism, all these words, we need to find better words that haven't been hijacked, because once a word gets into circulation, everybody's trying to spin it and make it mean something that it doesn't, mostly in a way that will scare us. Russia, that's another scary word to some people that we need to figure out the truth. We need to really look at Russia as it is, instead of what the spin masters have tried to make it into. We need to look at interventionary wars and call them what they are. We need to look at the motives behind them. We need to look at the whole thing. And very, very much we need to look at our environment and how it's disappearing on our watch. And our future generations will look to us and say, you had a chance, but you blew it. And then the future generations, if they survive, will be trying to clean up that mess for a long time. And it'll be a lot harder to clean up than Chernobyl and other messes that we've made. So we need to keep this, the real thrust of this is that the media are the tool of the oligarchs. The media are owned by the oligarchs. The media don't want any of this to happen. And the reason I'm a teacher is because I believe education is the most profoundly significant way to break the vicious circle and to intervene in a system that has gone off the tracks, that has run amok. We need to educate people, and what's going on now is propaganda and not education. So we need to reverse that trend, and we need to get the word out. Education, if we could get the media to go down, then education would reform quickly. The powers that don't want media to do their rightful actual job also don't want education to do its rightful actual job. And if we could figure out how to get past the media blockade, past the propaganda machine, I think that we could also reform education. And if we did, if we had a powerfully fair and if we could have an education system that gave people the idea that their lives belong to them, that the reason they existed was for their own pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. If we could get people awake to the idea that their lives belong to them and not to the plutocrats, that would be a major goal of education, as opposed to just training people and knocking down their lack of compliance, turning them into obedient little servants. That's what education does now. And if we could overhaul education, we would do that with the arts. That's where I come in. And we would wake people up to the idea that beauty and joy and kindness are why we're here, and not to serve markets. We're not little cogs in the machinery of markets, like Ronald Reagan and Maggie Thatcher want us to think. That shit needs to stop. And a solid education system is the very best way to help future generations escape the market-driven machine, the matrix, really, that we're all part of right now. Please read the article on Wikipedia. Please weigh in there. Please watch this episode of the Michael Brooks Show and read that new article on Obama. The whole article, it's awesome. And stay informed and spread the news. Share all this on social media. Share it on Twitter. Share it on Facebook. Share it on Reddit. And let's get this word out. The times are a-changin', we hope. Keep on burning.
Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Go get on board